Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first mixer for the Education and Career Development team, part of the AOCS Student Common Interest Group. We're so happy to see you all today, and we know you're looking forward to the two exciting talks we have lined up on how to maximize your career opportunities. We'll be finding out more from our invited speakers, Mr. Lowell Isom and Dr. Nandika Bandara. Just a note to everyone that's joining in, please update your Zoom profile name to your first name _ university name. It just makes it easier when we're doing the questions. And just another note to the audience members that after each speaker's presentation, we will be opening up a Q&A session, so you can ask your questions then, and you can do that by either typing in the chat box, raising your hand, and then we can call on you, or just unmuting yourself and just asking the question. Please don't hesitate to ask questions. So just to get started, we will be introducing the moderators. My name is Neethu. I'm a PhD candidate at Rice University in the Department of Material Science and Nanoengineering, and I work with sustainable coatings for food preservation as well as 3D printing. And Francisco?
Hello, everyone. I'm Francisco. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Tennessee, Department of Food Science, and my research is in synthetic chemistry and crystallography of lipids.
Great, thank you, Francisco. And now on to introducing the first speaker. I have the absolute pleasure and honor to introduce Mr. Lowell Isom. Mr. Isom started consulting with Hollander Horizon International in 2006 and brought decades of experience in product development and management roles within the food and pharmaceutical industries. Mr. Isom holds a bachelor's in biology and a master's in food microbiology. Interestingly, he also holds a certification as a pastry chef while attending culinary school at Kendall College. Mr. Isom began his professional career with Abbott Laboratories in the Thyroid Diagnostic Research Group and then joined Kraft Foods R&D in 1996 as a product development scientist. Within his 4-year tenure, he eventually became a group leader responsible for leading product development in the cheese division. While applied technology manager at the Soleil company, Mr. Isom was instrumental in the development of numerous soy-based dairy analogs technologies, including cheese and liquid and powdered beverages. Mr. Isom was also director of R&D for a joint venture between DuPont and General Mills known as the Eighth Continent. In 2012, Mr. Isom purchased Hollander Horizon International, HHI, and has been acting as manager partner since then. To give a brief background on HHI Search, it is an executive search firm specializing in the technical sector of the food and consumer products industry. So for today's talk, Mr. Isom will be giving us an insight into the industry perspective on career management and networking techniques, including effective interview preparation, resume writing, and more. So with that, thank you so much to Mr. Isom for joining us here today. We're so excited to learn more. And without further ado, I'll pass it out to Mr. Lowell Isom.
Great. Good morning. Good afternoon, I should say. Welcome, everyone. Well, let's start with the basics. So thank you for the introduction. That was great. Obviously I have a background in food science and technology, spent many years in the industry, and then had the opportunity to join a recruiting firm. Interestingly enough, a recruiting firm that not only represented myself, but helped me build my technical teams whenever I was in the industry. So fast forward, the two gentlemen that were running it for 35 years were looking to retire, so I took over the firm from them, and now we're doing the same thing. We hire scientists and engineers specifically out of the food industry to come and recruit for us. So as you start to look to, leave an academic world and join the industry, if it's related to food science and technology, we'd certainly love to connect with you. Everyone here that works in our firm has an advanced degree in science or technology in the food industry and was a former director or above within a major consumer food company or ingredient space. So it's a great firm to partner with. Generally we're doing more executive level type positions, right, after you've had a few years of experience. But certainly want to get to know you early on in your career, and then hopefully, throughout the 30 or 40 years that you'll be working, we'll have an opportunity to represent you. what I thought I'd just go through is a couple of basic questions that we often get asked about the recruiting process and how it all works and what are some of the tips and tricks. So I'll kind of start there, but you can also, interrupt me at any time and ask questions. I think it's first important to state what is a recruiter, right? I think most of you know that you can apply for positions through, websites or through LinkedIn, other social media. And then there's also recruiting events, right? Where people come from various companies to the university and you have an opportunity to share your resume with them. A recruiter is kind of more of a career coach that is working with an organization to really spearhead the search for a very specific individual. So say we're looking for a PhD fats and oils chemist that has, 15 plus years experience in the industry. A company would reach out to us and pay us a fee, right, to go out and to communicate with folks like yourself and find several individuals that are a good match and interested. And then ultimately we facilitate the whole, what we call talent acquisition process. And so the recruiters are paid a fee by the company to do this. This is nothing that you will see or have any responsibility for. But it's important to note how recruiters are compensated because that also dictates how they work with you. There's two categories. There's one called a contingent recruiter and one called a retained recruiter. What a contingent recruiter means is that your fee, the fee to the recruiter, is contingent upon them filling a job, right? So if I'm able to place you in a job in a company, I ultimately get paid. If I don't get paid, right? And so there's a lot of, I would say, bias sometimes in terms of someone's willingness to share your information to a job, whether it may or may not be a good fit because they're just ultimately trying to fill the job, right? We are what's called retained recruiters, where we are actually paid in advance to do the search. And what that does, it takes off any sort of influence in terms of the type of candidate or the profile that we present because we've already been compensated. Now we can sit back, relax, really find the perfect match for the company, but then also the perfect match for you. So I think that's valuable as you start to work with recruiters in your career. Ask, hey, are you contingent? Are you retained? And you'll find that those that are of the retained format are probably, a little bit more of the higher echelon. Now, you may not have the opportunity to work with a retained recruiter until you have a few years experience, right? So in the beginning, you may actually be working with a contingent recruiter. There's no issues with that, but just know the nomenclature and how they operate so you can also sort of protect yourself. So this resume, right? So this is what you're going to do. You're going to give this resume to a recruiter. And one thing you got to remember is that that's your brand, right? So anytime you distribute your resume, you want to know where it goes. And I always would use this statement saying, I'll be happy to share my resume with you, but before it would leave your hands again and go to someone else, could you please contact me and ask for permission? Seems like it should be a very simple protocol, right? It doesn't often happen. And so I tell people that are, just getting started in the job hunt, be really careful about where and how you distribute your resume, again, because this is your brand and your image to the industry. As you're writing this resume, I'm sure career services have given you some assistance in terms of how to prepare that. But I think the key takeaways for me are really just two things. I also have an executive resume format. If anybody's ever interested, I'll be happy to, at the end, janitors or one of the team members will post my email address so you can contact me directly for that. But really, at the end of the day, it's about quantification and qualification, right? So as you list all of your experiences, everything that you've done to date, you not only want to qualify it, but you want to quantify it, right? You're a scientist and an engineer. So not only say what you did, but how you did it, and what was the end result. So what does that look like, right? So if you are writing a bullet point, it's going to make a statement of you've led, you've managed, you've driven, an action word to really show what you've done, right? Managed a team of 40 professionals that delivered $45 million in incremental revenue. So what that does is not only qualified what you did, but it quantified it, right? Gave a fact, figure, and number, something to really chew on. And why is that important? Because the resume, even if it's 2 or 3 pages long, you're likely only going to get the first page looked at, right? And it's only going to be maybe 45 seconds, sometimes if you're lucky, a minute. And so you need things on that page that are jumping out that differentiate you from everyone else. And as you're looking at a job in industry, it's all about revenue, right? A publicly traded company is about making money. And so if you can show, quantification of what you delivered, it immediately sets you apart from everyone else. The last thing, the two that I'm going to share, there are many, but the last thing I want to share with you today is around format. Love a creative resume format. People are putting colors and blocks and pictures, but hey, listen, at the end of the day, there's a huge volume of people, right? And these resumes are not personally seen by a set of human eyes in every occasion. Most often, your information is captured by something called an ATS. That's an applicant tracking system, right? It's just sort of an artificial intelligent way for it to recognize your resume, parcel all your information out of it, and put it into a database that makes it searchable to find whether you're fitting for a particular job. So don't get too crazy, right? Use kind of the traditional format, because these systems have been designed to look for names, phone numbers, email addresses, key skill sets, right? And pull those out. And sometimes if a resume gets a little too creative, a little off traditional format, it'll have a hard time pulling that in. It's a huge missed opportunity, right? Because no one's really monitoring this. So for example, a Kraft or a Kellogg's or a General Mills, right? Companies that are 40, 50, 60 billion dollars. They may get hundreds of thousands of applicants a year. And their system is just pulling these in and creating profiles that are in a searchable database. And if you've missed the opportunity to do that correctly, then if you don't have a live connection, it could not work towards your benefit. So it's a little bit about the resume. I think it's really important as you get a job profile to modify your resume to fit that, looking for key terms, really trying to showcase your fit. So you won't just have one version of resume. Every time, spend the effort. If you're looking for a position, every time you have a new position comes along, craft a version specifically for that organization. So now you have a resume, right? So you want to start to network. Great. Maybe you find a recruiter, maybe you apply online, but let's talk about LinkedIn. So LinkedIn has become a really incredibly powerful tool to our industry. And a lot of people just see it as another social media, but it's actually much bigger than that. LinkedIn, of course, is a professional place where you're going to post the majority of what's on your resume. Not all, I said majority. Because the key behind LinkedIn is that you're trying to create a profile that's enticing and engaging, but you don't want to say too much, right? You want to leave them wondering for a little more so that they can reach out and talk to you. If you give them everything up front, perception is reality. They think they're going to know you and know whether you are or are not a fit. So I tell folks, go ahead, add quite a bit into your profile on LinkedIn, but maybe not at all, maybe 80%, 90% of what's really in terms of your key deliverables. Let's talk a little bit about LinkedIn and how it works. So the LinkedIn you see is very different than the LinkedIn that someone like myself sees on the recruiter side. There are really two faces to it, right? The forward side of it is, networking with peers and sharing your profile, and that's free, right? There's really no cost for you to manage that or place it on there. The backside of LinkedIn is a really powerful business, and it's incredibly lucrative. Just to give you some context, people like myself that want to find you on LinkedIn, or let's even just say if you want to find a peer set yourself, you can only see your first connection or your second connection or your third connection. It works by hierarchy, right? So the more people you're connected to and the closer you're connected to, the more access you have to seeing their entire profile. But what if it's someone like me from the outside who may not have a connection in the fats and oils world, but I want to see everyone that's there? You have to pay for access to that, right? So that's how LinkedIn generates their revenue, is allowing folks like myself to buy into being able to see full profiles. And to give you an understanding of how critical of a tool this is for companies to find candidates, for one seat, we call it, right? One person to be able to sit and go in and access all of the profiles on LinkedIn, it's approximately $10,000 a year just for one seat, right? So you can imagine that companies could be spending several $100,000 a year just to have their teams have access to LinkedIn. And so you on the free side want to make sure you're really tapping into that and making sure that you're attractive enough that organizations can pick you up and see your skill sets. About LinkedIn itself too, the picture, right? It's critical, right? I may be, dress casual today, but look at my LinkedIn picture, right? A lot of effort went into it, making sure you get a professional headshot, where you're showing the image that you want to portray in the industry. I know it's enticing to say, hey, it's like any other social media, just snap a quick selfie and put it up. Take the time. It's really worth it. 1,000 words, as they say, and perception is reality. I would be more often to put a picture than to not. When I see a profile that does not have a LinkedIn picture, I often think, what's going on there? Is there something that I need to be concerned about? Below your picture is a headline. You want to make good use of that. That is not fats and oils chemist. It is something about you, an enticing, a capture, creative innovation driver who's looking for a new career opportunity, something that is really going to be your brand. It's going to differentiate you from the hundreds of other profiles that they see. And you'll see some creative ones. Flip through LinkedIn, look at your peer sets, get some ideas. And I think you'll have a good opportunity to really hone in what that looks like. That is said, so now interviewing. We'll quickly touch on that. We got a few more minutes. So when you go to an interview, just remember this. You've got 45 minutes to an hour with a person for them to get to know who you are, right? There's no way they can know who you are in that time period, but their perception of you becomes reality. And what I mean by that is everything you say, you do becomes the data that they use to determine who you are. It's a little unfair, right? I mean, 45 minutes doesn't give you really long to capture who you are and the essence of what you do. But from the moment you arrive, be careful about how you're interacting, what you're saying, who you're talking to. I've had organizations that said, great candidate, incredible technical skill set, but we're not going to hire them because you know what? They showed up and went to the front desk to get their badge, and they were incredibly rude to the security guard. Totally dismissed them as if they were just a pair of hands there to help. They are part of our organization. They're part of our team. They're somebody we value. And so just know that all eyes are on you from the minute you arrive to the minute you leave. And that goes into things like, fine line between being cocky and confident, right? You want to be confident, but you don't want to be overly confident. That's number one interview killer is somebody comes in and it's I, me, a lot of first person. This is really about you being part of a broader team. And I know that's hard when you come from a research environment, that this is your research and you're leading it and you are the one that's, going to be the primary author. But as you go into an organization, it's becoming part of a larger team. So be sensitive to that. And then on the interview piece, let's just quickly talk about this idea, this little trick that I have that you can use when you're interviewing. It's really important, since you only have that 45 minutes, to be as concise as possible, right? And not to go down a rabbit hole and not to give, a 5-10 minute answer for the question they're asking. And then you get misconstrued as somebody that's not focused or who can't think strategically. And so what I use is something called the STAR model, STAR. That's the acronym, right? And what that basically means is that you have S, situation, T for task, A for action, R for results. It's four bullets. That's it. So when you go to answer a question, you're going to answer it just in that format: situation, task, action, and result. And, of course, you're not going to say the situation was and the tasks were and the action was, but you're going to just fluently kind of have it sort of mapped out. So you go into your own career and you look at the 2 or 3 things that you've really accomplished, the component of your research or something that you've delivered, and put together in your mind a little story of the situation, the task, the action, result, and have that. You go ahead, write it on an index card, but stick it in your pocket. Don't access it, or maybe put it mentally on your postcard. But that's the way you're going to structure how you're going to communicate your answer. And we find every time it gets the point across. It's very clear. It's very concise. So just remember STAR. I think I'll stop there because I know we wanted to have enough time for questions. So you can either put them in to the chat or unmute, raise your hand. And I see we've got one there with Francisco. Oh, we got a couple questions. So
Hi, Mr. Isom. I have a burning question. So this happened to me recently. What's the best way to negotiate a starting salary? So I'm one of those people that don't like to talk about money. Just that's the way I grew up. So how do I? Well, it already happened, so it's done. But how would I, in the future, as a recent graduate with zero industry experience, how do I sell myself for? How do I sell myself and ask for a little bit more money? Because everybody tells you you got to negotiate, but nobody tells you how. So
Yeah, good point. Well, first you have to get over talking about money, okay? Because the reason why you go to work every day is not for fun. We go to support our lives and our families, right? So it's critical. But it is difficult. Two things. If you don't have a recruiter that can guide you on what the salary is, if you're working directly with them, I get that. There is, the Institute of Food Technology does publish a salary survey. And the really interesting thing about that, it's every 2 years. It can be accessed online if you're an IFT member. And the interesting thing about that is that for probably under 10 years of experience, there's a pretty high participation rate. So the data in there really can give you a good idea of where you should be from a compensation standpoint. And I should say, yes, you should negotiate, but that's a very slippery slope because you're also sending an image and a perception to this organization while you're negotiating, right? And sometimes it can get very tenuous. And we've had situations where, the employers backed out of the offer and said, wow, they're pushing too hard, right? If they're going to nickel and dime us, maybe they're not the right fit for the organization. So you want to push back slightly appropriately. But here's going to be my advice. If you're going to ask for something, you're going to immediately give something in return. Let's say they made you an offer at $75,000 base. And you thought to myself, gosh, I want it to be 78 or maybe 80. So you would go, and this is based on your data, right? You would go in there and say, I'm super excited about this opportunity. I know what my market value is. I'm really hoping to have 78,000. And I tell you what, if I can get $78,000, I'm going to accept immediately right now, right? So you're going to ask for something, but you're going to give something in return. It's a negotiation for them as well. They're ultimately trying to get you there. Now, the last thing I'll leave you, you can't worry too much about whether you're appropriately slotted or getting the right compensation, or is your peer set getting $3,000 more than you? Because at the end of the day, large organizations are held to EEOC guidelines, right? Equal employment opportunities. They're getting audited, maybe not on a yearly basis, but every several years to see that individuals with similar profiles are within a certain percentage of each other on their compensation. It would not behoove them to put you in under market value. And then you quickly learn that and then realize, oh, I'm unhappy. I can leave and go to Kraft and make $10,000 more. So I'm not saying that there's, a global sort of standard that would prevent you from being undercompensated. But I think most people would be surprised to find out that it's not as much of a mystery as you think it is. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
I think we have another
Should I go
question.
ahead?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Mr. Eisen, thank you so much. It was a great, there were like you provided great insights about this career development in the industry side. And I have actually two questions, one about the resume preparation and the other one is actually about LinkedIn. So about the resumes, I was wondering if you have any suggestions about the time span of the activities that we should mention in our resume. So I know that it shouldn't be really crowded, but sometimes we have some struggles about, like, let's say we have a very nice achievement or a very good award or something, but it happened like maybe 10 years ago. Would it still worth to highlight in there, or do you have any suggestions saying like you should only put like last 5 years activities or last 5 years experiences or anything?
Yeah, so I tend to offer more than less. And what I say to myself is that I keep it to 2 pages, right? And publications and presentations can be added as a separate document that you can provide separately. So you take the 2 pages, right? And I would really, unless you're a 25 or 30-year veteran in the industry, I'd try to list every thing that you have done. It's just that your current task, your current role will have maybe say 5, 6 bullet points, but then previous roles are only going to have 2 or 3. So you still want to address them and touch them and have them there, because what we're also looking for is sort of gaps in employment or gaps in things that you've done, right? They're looking for, hey, if you started in 1994, that until today that you were either consistently employed or consistently in school.
Awesome. This was really, really helpful. Thank you so much. And about the LinkedIn, so there are actually a couple of questions that I have about it. First of all, do you think there is any advantages of having a premium account for LinkedIn in that case for the people, especially at the very beginning of their job application process? And do you have any suggestions about how to write a good summary part for the LinkedIn accounts?
Well, I don't necessarily see a value of having a premium account, because I think it's paid on the other end. I think it's just a way for LinkedIn, quite honestly, to capture some extra revenue from poor students. And in terms of the title, it's really nothing. It's not like it's only one sentence long, if that, and you maybe only want to have it 4 or 5 words. So mine is recruiting the future in technology, right? So okay, recruiting must be a recruiter, right? Technology must be kind of technology related. Kind of future is sort of forethought, right? So I was trying to put things together to say, okay, I am a recruiter. I do work exclusively in technology, but I'm kind of forward thinking, right? To try to get them to that next level of, and so that's kind of what your mindset is that what is it about your core essence that you want people to know, rather than saying, polymer chemist or oil chemist.
Oh, I see. All right. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much. Really appreciated it.
Of course.
Mr. Isom, I've got another question.
Sure.
So you mentioned the ATS sort of bot that looks at your resume. Is this ATS bot also at play in LinkedIn? And also, when this bot looks at your resume, does it look for a specific font or specific keywords that help it put you somewhere?
Yeah. Okay. No font or specific keywords, because all it does is it catalogs them, right? So it just takes all the keywords and puts them into an accessible database. And yes, mine can look at a LinkedIn profile and create a resume off of your LinkedIn profile and import that immediately into my database. So they are seamless if you pay for the service to do that. So anywhere you have information posted about you can likely be, they call them internet divers, right? It can dive in and capture data and import that into your private database. Now, also things that you have on, Facebook or Instagram or Twitter that maybe are not so positive and are about your, personal life or personality, that information can be captured too. So, if you're getting ready to look for a job in a major consumer company, probably best to start cleaning up a little bit of your social media.
Oh, wow. Is that illegal? Can they?
Not at all. It's public information, right? And there's no input or monitoring, right? It could just be suggestive and somebody sees it. And the feedback you may get is, we had 4 or 5 applicants. We found somebody that's perfect. See, the whole idea behind placement and recruiting is there's a lot of gray areas, right? There's still a lot of room to find reasons that aren't necessarily what I would say, the most appropriate reasons for turning a person away from a position. So don't give them that opportunity.
Thank you.
Nita, do we have some time to ask one more question?
Like 2 more minutes. We could do another question.
Okay. I have just one last.
Sure.
Okay, so Mr. Isom, there's this thing that we're now going through this back to normal phase in all phase of this job application process. And now when you apply for a position, you usually ask if you would like to have an online interview or an on-site interview. I have been asked like this before, and I was really in the middle of thinking which one would be more advantageous for me. What do you have? Do you have any suggestions for that for the applicants? Do you think one of the other would be more advantageous for the applicants?
Well, in terms of advantageous for you is that ultimately if an offer is going to be made, you're going to have an on-site visit anyway, or you're going to want to request that to be able to see the physical location and determine whether it's somewhere that you want to live, right? Because it's not just the job, it's also about going to the physical location. I don't anymore think that there's necessarily any advantages to being in person versus digitally. I don't think that you're going to be selling yourself short by any means. I think that it can really streamline the process. It can get you through much quicker. The advantage is decisions can be made faster from a video standpoint. You know, by the time you prepare for travel and you get there and, you know, book a hotel and a car and all that, you were 2 weeks out before you're through the whole process. But hey, can you meet tomorrow for 45 minutes? I would probably at this point recommend continuing with digital, but requesting at the very end to have an on-site visit to make sure that location fits for you and your family.
All right. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Right.
Great. So I think we can, I just want to say thank you, Mr. Isom, for answering the question. And if anyone has more questions, feel free to type it in the chat box and we could answer it at a later time, or probably could type it in the chat. And we can also provide the email later after the mixer. So I will share the screen again. And Francisco, you can take it off.
Okay, so now our next speaker is Dr. Bandara. He's an assistant professor and Canada Research Chair in Food Protein and Bioproducts at the Department of Food and Human Nutrition at the University of Manitoba. He is a certified food scientist, a material scientist, and does interdisciplinary research in food protein chemistry, nanotechnology, bio-based renewable polymers, and bioproducts and biomaterials. In addition, he serves as associate editor for the Journal of Food Chemistry, or Food Chemistry Journal, and as well as Food Research International. He's a Canada Research Chair and is a chair designate at the Food Chemistry Division for IFT and has an age index of 13, which is quite impressive. So please help me welcome Dr. Bandara. And Dr. Bandara, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So let me share the screen first. So okay, can you see that?
Yeah, we can see the screen.
Okay, perfect. So what I would discuss in like next couple of minutes is a little bit going to be different from what Mr. Isom mentioned, because in academia, like unlike in the industry, there are certain things that still works in a little bit, I would say, old school, but still like it's important if you're looking for an academic career. So the biggest thing is academic careers, it's not a straight line. Like I know the traditional thinking that you have to be a grad student, then postdoc, then assistant professor and tenured professor. So that's just the standard pathway, right? But I know personally many people who went into the industry right after their PhD, worked there for a couple of years and then came back to academia. So postdoc is important, but not in all situations. Oh, before I move forward, I just need to give the credit for like PhD Comics. Like this is a website that I looked at all the time when I was a grad student that made my mind, like put my mind at ease when I feel stressed or something, because it's funny and it's basically talking about the real life. So I took many images from that website for today's presentation. So yes, it's important to do like graduate studies, then a postdoc, but if you go into the industry, don't discount that you can, like thinking that you can't come back to the academia. You can always come back. One of my good collaborators at Waterloo, he worked at the DuPont for almost 4 years and then came back to a faculty position. So it's not a straight line. You can always like change your career from industry to academia as well, because some of the positions, especially in like science and technology, that industry experience really helps. Okay, so even if you're in industry, just don't give up. And the biggest question that we get all the time is like, what really matters in academia? So how can you get academic position? I finished my PhD in the like latter part of 2017. So I did postdoc, but not very long because I got my first faculty position within a couple of months in my first postdoc. So how could I get it? Or like, what is the most easiest way? I wouldn't say easiest, but like the most approachable way to get a faculty position in academia. So one of the biggest misinterpretation about the academic position is that if you have large number of papers that you're going to get a position. But if you do a Google search about in Google Scholar, you can see that there are many people with really strong research publications, but still serving as like a postdoctoral research associate for a long time without a faculty position. Yes, papers are important, doing your presentations at international conferences, industry seminars, all those things are important. But do we really think that that's the only thing that matters in academia? So the most common understanding, or sometimes even what most of the professors would tell you, is that publish or perish. You need publications. Yes, it does. But at the same time, publication alone will never going to get you the faculty position. That I can guarantee from my personal experience twice. Once at Dalhousie when I got my first position, the second at the Canada Research Chairperson here in Manitoba. Both times, the other candidates who compete with me for the final interviews, they had more papers than me. They had more years of postdoc experience than me. But what changed you from all those applicants is everything else that you do. So one of the biggest thing in academia is effective communication. You could be a great researcher, but if you can't communicate it, that science doesn't exist. Like, I know like it exists in publication, but if you cannot present what you did qualitatively and quantitatively, just like Ms. Tyson said, so that's your achievement, right? So you should really communicate that to the search committee. And unlike in the, which we will go in like a little bit later, like unlike in the industry interview, academic interviews are like way long. It's stand for like almost 2 days, like 2 full days interview. So that's what the academic interview would look like. Not like a 45 or 1 hour, like 45 minutes or 1 hour interview with the industry. So that communication part is really important, not just during your presentation. It's during like from the point that you get down from the airport in the location, someone will come to pick you up. That's where that effective communication should start. Because exactly like what Ms. Tyson said, the interview will start from the place where you get down from the airport when someone comes to pick you up for the academic interview. It's not just during the 2 research, like the research seminar and the teaching seminar, and then in the formal interview. It's from that beginning, during the formal, like informal dinner, even though it calls informal dinner, it's not. So it's actually a place where they will look at your like social behavior as well. So a couple of other things, networking with peers. So you really need to get to know about people, the peers who work in your research area. That's how you get to know about the academic position. That's how you build that network with them. So go to the conference, not just to present your research, go to the social level. Even if you don't drink or anything, you can still go there, like hang around, talk with people. That really helps, okay? And the other thing is like the teaching skills. This is something that sometimes as, well, I wouldn't say all of them, but some of the professors say, okay, focus on the research, no need of doing like TA, no need of doing anything else. But when you go for academic interview, that's one of the critical factors, because most of the faculty position, they're divided into like 3 components in workload. So teaching, research, and service activities. So your research component, like for example, in Canada, most of the regular faculty position, they come with a workload distribution of 40, 40, 20. So 40% research, 40% teaching, 20% service. And during the interview, they will evaluate all those 3. So research, obviously you do all the presentations, everything like publications, so you cover that area. But teaching 40% will be evaluated using your TA work, your guest lectures, all those things that you develop during your school. If there is a graduate teaching training program offered by your school, do that one. It's really important, okay? The service component is where you will be evaluated by using activities like your volunteer works, leadership activities in the societies. So even though sometimes it feels like, okay, this takes more time from me and I have a less time for the research. I know it's hard, grad school is not easy, but you have to balance both of them. You have to do like very effective research, but at the same time, you need to improve your like leadership activities, volunteer work. Those things matter during academic interviews. And one of the things that you might be surprised, like in both my academic interviews where I went. Like I went for 2 academic interviews where I got like both of them. And it's basically, they never ask any technical details, none. So technical details about like, okay, how did you do this experiment? No one is going to ask that question. It's about that big picture of the research and teaching and the leadership role that they're asking most of the time. Okay, so that will bring me to the academic CV and interview. So unlike in the industry-related jobs, academic CVs don't have a length. The longer you stay in the academia, your CV gets long and even longer. So I have seen some of the CVs with like 30, 35 pages. My previous department head have a CV of like almost 50 pages long, because in academic field, people do take time to read through that one, because when we are hiring a faculty member, because I have been serving in like 5 different search committees since I started my first academic position in 2018. So when we search for a person, we do really go into the detail of the CV. So it's really important to clearly categorize your academic achievements. So your academic employment, your teaching experience, your research experience, your publications, and then even like your leadership activities, your volunteer work, like all of them, like journal review, grant review, any of the activities that you do, it's really important to categorize them properly and put it in the academic CV. The other major important part when it comes to academic CV is showing your contribution. So let's say you put like 10 publications and 8 of them are like co-authored publication, and you may be like second or third author. If you don't highlight your contribution, what's your actual contribution, we tend to give a little bit lower value on that one. So you really need to say like, okay, this is a paper, in front of it, like just one line saying what your contribution is. That's something that's very important in academic CVs. I know this is going to be too long for the industry CVs, but this is what they look at during an academic interview. And the other thing is like, if you want to get an idea about like academic type CVs, there are some industry standard, well, the academic standard like CVs. For example, in Canada, we have something called Canadian Common CV. So anyone can create like a account in there. So if you go into that one, it actually gives you like all the categories that you need to fill in academic CV. Europass is another one. Unfortunately, about US, I'm not really familiar, but I'm only like familiar with these two. But there should be some like standard NIH or like USDA standard type of CVs, which I'm not familiar with. But at least in like Canada, we have something called Canadian Common CV, and European countries use the Europass CV. Okay, so when you prepare the application for an academic interview, or let's say like you see an advertisement about a faculty position, you're starting to prepare the application package. So unlike in the industry, this is actually a big application package. So first thing you need that like well-planned academic CV. I actually forgot to include one thing. You need a good cover letter too. So in the cover letter, which can extend actually up to 2 pages, because that's kind of the standard that we look at in the academic cover letters, you need to basically highlight everything that you have done in a summary format and why you are the best candidate for that particular position. Then you need that academic CV, which is detailed enough and categorize all your achievements in like chronological order. So start with the most recent one and then go back. That's how like normally we like for the academic CVs. And for the other main important thing is the research statement. So you really need to craft a research statement. Most of the time, this is a 2-page statement, unless the university specifically asks. So there are certain universities say like we need a 3-page, 4-page, or 1-page research statement. So depend, like unless they specifically mention, this standard is like kind of giving a 2-page research statement. So in that 2-page research statement, we basically have to show what's your research vision. It's not an individual research project. This is where most people making a mistake. Most of the people, they just like write a research project because that's what we use as a grad students, right? But it's not a research project that we are looking at. It's your research vision and it's your research program for the next 5 to 10 years. So there are good examples, even like online, there are some good blogs about the academic like interviews. There is a really good blog called Female Professor. So that one really like showing some of the like ways that you need to prepare for the academic interviews. That's how, to be honest, like I learned for the first time. The teaching statement and teaching philosophy is another 2-page document, unless the university specify that one. So in that one, basically you need to show what's your philosophy on teaching, your experience, and what's your plan for teaching. So this is a kind of a creative document where you can see like, what's your thought on teaching, how you're planning to improve the, like mentor the students and those kind of things. The other most important document is the EDI statement. This is becoming extremely important, especially in academia. So if you are submitting application package, make sure to write a 1-page, at least a half-page equity, diversity, and inclusion statement. So it's basically to show what's your contribution to EDI, what's your thought on EDI, how you would work at the university to improve the EDI, both in teaching, research, as well as in services. Some of the universities are directly asking this document, but even if they don't ask, submit that 1-page document, because that will separate your application from the rest. Because especially in the universities, this EDI is becoming an extremely critical factor when it comes to faculty hiring. So interview preparation and like parts during the interview, as I mentioned, it's really important to keep in mind your interview start from the time you get down from the flight. Academic interviews are 2 full days. That's one of the reasons why I don't like this online interview, unlike in the industry format. We do conduct online interviews now, but you can't really measure the actual capacity and the required qualifications by using a video interview when it comes to a faculty position. So we are really like, we did a couple of like most recent online interviews, but we actually saying the same thing, like, okay, we really need to get back to the in-person interviews, because it's a 2 full day interview. You come in, do a 1-hour research presentation, and then you have meetings with the graduate students, you have meetings with the postdocs, you have meetings with the technical staff, and then you have some individual meetings with the dean of the school, department head, 5-6 faculty members in the department who are in your research area, and then a formal dinner at, they call it informal dinner at the first day night, and then second day starting with the teaching seminar, couple of other meetings, and then with formal interview of like 2 hours. So it's a 2-hour interview where they will question about your research, teaching, and service activities. So that 2 full days is exhausting. In a way, that's something that they look at as well. So how is your like tolerance for taking a stressful work? So that's why like in academic setting, we prefer the in-person interviews, but unfortunately we can't do it right now. So we are doing the online meetings as well, like the online interviews. So those are the like key things that I wanted to mention, but I know like this is not something that we can discuss in like half an hour. Academic interviews is a long process. Like if the way that you discuss with your department head or the dean is a little bit different from how you discuss with the students. When it comes to the negotiation, unlike the common belief, you should negotiate in academic positions. Most people, they think like if you start, because academic positions are very rare, right? So we only get like a couple of positions, especially if you look at Canada, like in food science, there is 3-4 positions in every 2 years. That's like how frequent you get the academic position. So in US, it's a little bit more, but even though you think that it's not a good idea to negotiate, the universities actually expect you to negotiate, even though they don't directly tell it to you. So they start with the lower startup package, not just for the salaries, because salaries sometimes universities have a standard structure, but when it comes to the startups funding to set up your group, they start with a little bit lower. So if you negotiate, you can increase it. For example, in my first faculty position, I managed to increase the startup funding by like double. But another faculty member who started at the same time, she didn't negotiate, so she got the standard startup. So it's important that you do that negotiation when you get the job at faculty position as well.
Dr. Bandara, we're running short on time, so I'd like to open up to questions from you.
Absolutely.
If there are no questions, I have a question. It's not another burning question. So I'm going into industry next year, but eventually I'd like to return to academia. So from that perspective, if you are in a search committee, and let's say you have 2 candidates that are a good fit, one being from industry with very little, because of being in industry for so long or a certain number of years, they have very little publications or research activity. How much value do you place on industry experience?
It depends on the position. So for example, the person I mentioned at Waterloo, like he works at DuPont. So he didn't have any research publications during that 3.5 to 4 years that he worked at DuPont. But during that time, he applied for, I think, more than 6 or 7 patents. So even though you don't have like, because he was working in the R&D division in the industry. So if you are working in R&D division, it's easy to like contribute to research work in a different way. It doesn't have to be necessarily like research publication. So patents do have a value. The presentations that you do in a conference representing industry, that have a value as well. But unlike the common belief, most people in industry, they do publish as well. For example, if you look at some of the R&D people in Cargill, DuPont, like those people do publish the work that they do, unless you are in like, let's say, quality assurance or some other different area.
Thank you. So we have a question from the audience, an audience member. The question is, how is the usual application process for a postdoc? When do you think students should start applying for a postdoc? So either in their last year or a couple of months before graduation. And how long, most importantly, how long should one be in a postdoc?
Okay, so if you are looking for a postdoc, start at least 6 months before you like finish your thesis. Because most of the time, like if you wait until your graduation, we hire people based on the funding we receive, right? So, and if you look at like, let's say US, there is a certain time period, most of the grants will like make the results like into public. So that would be the time that people will start hiring. Same thing in Canada. But then again, there are some industry funding that you might get like time to time. So we get funding pretty much throughout the year, and we hire when we get a research grant. So unless you start early and make some initial discussion, it's not that when you finish it that we will have some position available. So it's always good to start a couple of months early.
We have 2 questions in the chat. We're running out of time, so unfortunately some of the questions we'll have to save for later. How do you build a network effectively while you're a PhD student? This is for both Dr. Nandika and Mr. Isam. And also, what are the differences between talking to a dean from talking to students?
Okay. So in terms of like networking with students, like one of the things that I experienced when I was a grad student not so long ago, people are actually very friendly, especially if you meet people at conference, especially even like a huge guys in our research field. They're actually really nice people. If you go and talk to them, they will talk about your research. They're always happy to talk with you. Maybe it's a little bit different in industry. I'm not familiar, but at least in academia, in academic setting, they always like to talk about the research. So just go and talk to them, introduce yourself, tell what you're doing. And I will let Mr. Ison to add.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's going to be the same whether you're in academia or industry, that just get in front of folks. And if you have any kind of trade show, Institute of Food Technology, maybe one, oil chemists conference, anything that you can actually physically go meet people, interact, go to on-campus recruiting initiatives. When there are companies looking, maybe you're not looking for an industry position, but go, there's usually a scientist or an engineer there and get a chance to meet with them and network. So.
Absolutely. So do we have time to answer the other one?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So like when you talk with the students, like you have to be prepared for the questions from the student standpoint, right? Like their main question would be what kind of courses that you would bring in, how you would like improve the teaching. Like, okay, we don't like this kind of courses. So do you have any plan? So you need to think about the students' perspective when you talk with the students, especially in a faculty interview. At the same time, when you talk with, let's say, the department head or the dean, they will have more interest towards the big picture of your like research program, not necessarily the technical details. And they're not going to ask you like, okay, how are we going to do this particular like modification? No, that's not what they need. They need to look at like where you are planning to take your research from the next 5 to 10 years. So always having that big picture about your research is really important when you talk with the like search committee as well as the like any other faculty members in the interview committee.
And we're getting really good questions. So just a couple more minutes. Just one question for Mr. Isom. Is there room for food science PhD to find a job in the food industry? Do recruiters prefer a candidate with master's degree and 3 or 4 years of experience, or a candidate with PhD degree and with little experience in the industry?
Well, I think there's room for both. And I think there's two different strategies. If you want to be on the fundamental research side and generally be an individual contributor for the balance of your career in more of a technology expert, then get your PhD. If you have interest in going into maybe more leadership, general business manager, becoming a director, vice president of R&D, generally a master's degree is enough, but there is room for both.
Great. Okay. And as our last question, Daniel, thank you for your patience. Please, you can unmute yourself or type.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. My question is for both speakers. How do you evaluate a person's effective communication? Because if the interview is being conducted in English, then it means that the person who is a native speaker of English will probably have the highest mark because he's more fluent in the English language than someone who speaks Spanish or Chinese, because the interview is in English, so it is much more comfortable for the English speaker than a non-English speaker. So how do you evaluate a person's effective communication? Do you consider the origin of the person?
Mr. Eisen, do you want to go first or?
Yeah, certainly. So communication is more than just your ability to master the language, right? It's about content. So if you had a good interviewer, we're going to be listening for, what is the content intent behind what you're trying to communicate, and not so much about, your mastery of the English language. Now, there are roles where you might be an external sales technical consultant, and it would be more critical. But in a research role, it's about the technology and the skills that you deliver.
In academic field, same thing. Like I wouldn't say we don't really judge people based on whether they're native English speaker or not. Even myself, like I made mistake all the time when I'm not a native speaker, right? But what matters in effective communication, at least in the academia, is giving your content clearly. Maybe there are like some mistakes when you're speaking, that's fine. But as long as you can deliver that message and basically like create a good image about what's your plan, what are you going to do, and how you're going to do that, that's what's most important. So that's what effective communication, at least for us in the academia, not really like whether you have accent or whether you have like different language origin, that doesn't really matter for us. And you can see that in like faculty, like the faculty members you see in the departments as well, right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Dr. Nandik and Mr. Isom. That was well said. I really enjoyed all your answers and the questions. So we'll just do quickly the closing remarks. If I could share the screen, Dr. Nandika, thank you so much. Yeah, great. So just want to say thank you. There's been a lot of people involved in making today possible. So thank you to Janet, Victoria, Will, and our SCIG chair, AJ, as well as our education career development team, including Daniel, Francisco, and Olamide. Thank you also to the co-vice chairs, the communication coordinators, and the volunteers team for the SCIG team as well. They really helped spreading the word about today's mixer. So thank you to all these members, and I'll pass it off to Francisco.
Oh yeah, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Bandara and Mr. Eisen. Gained some valuable insights, and I know it's not just for me, it's for everybody else. So thank you everybody else for coming. And just some final announcements on December 6th. We have a couple of deadlines. December 6th, we have the SCIG social. On December 18th is the deadline for the travel grant applications. January 13th is the oral presentation deadline, and February 14th is the poster and e-poster deadline. So just keep that in mind. And once again, thank you all for coming and making time.
And the links are provided in the chat by Janet, so feel free to check.